Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody. I'm Preacher Moss, the host of the SOS, the Shout Out Show. I hope everybody's having a great day. You know how it is when we get to Wednesdays. Wednesdays can be hump day or dump day. Well, hopefully you are getting over the hump and you're not down in the dumps. I'm going to give a shout out to some people that need some love, understanding, care, and duas. There will be Mr. Kendrick Samuels, who's in recovery, Sister Eleanor Davis, our precious Sister Eleanor Davis, as well as, I haven't forgotten, Sister Lorraine Kitchen. We're pulling for you. We want you to have a full and robust recovery. And as well as Sister Nancy Mustafa, we hope that you're feeling better. Prayers are with you. And of course, over in Indonesia, we have prayers going out to Sister Ika's family fighting COVID. Her brother-in-law is fighting COVID, so we're pulling for them too. So again, before we get into the show, I just want to make sure that peace and prayers are going to people who are going through difficult situations. And if you find yourself going through a difficult situation, let us know. Hit us up at the Permissible Laughter, and we will get you up here and we'll get some, they will do ours out to you. That's the way it's going to be. If you let me know, we will put it out on the show. How about that? Now, brothers and sisters, today's show is a little bit different. Only in the fact that I'm revisiting something, and I really have an opportunity to revisit something that is somewhat like institutional, and then from the institutional space, it innovates and it becomes even more institutional. So sometimes something is ridiculous, but then it elevates and becomes even more ridiculous. And then in a dangerous space, it goes from more ridiculous to becoming a law. Case in point, Driscoll, Texas. Now, brothers and sisters, a lot of you don't know anything about Driscoll, Texas. I don't know anything about Driscoll, Texas either. What I know is the story that was put out about Driscoll, Texas, which is about 200 miles south of San Antonio, I believe. I might be mistaken. But the story that was put out about Driscoll, Texas is a horror story. It is an educational horror story. That's the title that you see, which is Teaching White Unpatriotic History. A lot of people say, well, preach, that's racist. No, I'm going to be honest. In the annals of halls of teaching and educators, a lot of African American, Latino, and Latino educators, people of color educators, we've said this before because we've been forced to teach history that we used to affectionately and unaffectionately call, are you teaching white today? Now, brothers and sisters, when I say teaching white, I'm not saying teaching racism. I'm talking about being a part of a system that makes sure that the people that you are teaching are not receiving the truth and the facts about the history, the heritage. Anybody knows, you have to work through a situation, particularly if you work through a situation to find out your own narrative as opposed to what people are telling you. It presents all kind of problems. I thought this story would be interesting, this example of teaching white, because we've been going through some things, brothers and sisters. We've had the argument, not the arguments, but we had the discussion about critical race theory. And things like what I'm about to talk about now emphasize why you must talk about critical race theory. Because it is a very, very devastating conversation starter about how the United States came to be. And one of the ways that the United States has come to be and maintain these systems that don't work is that you teach people over a period of time that one, either the system works, two, the system doesn't work, but three, there's nothing you can do about either one or two. So the case of Driscoll is interesting, and it starts out with a woman named Lupe Alaman. Again, that's Lupe Alaman. She was a woman in Driscoll, Texas. Now, what makes Lupe interesting, outside of being a young Latina in the first grade, is that the Driscoll School Board, the Driscoll School District, made her repeat the first grade 3 times. That's right, I said it. They made her repeat the first grade 3 times. It wasn't because she wasn't smart. It wasn't because she had any learning issues. It's because she spoke Spanish. And the racism in 1950 was so thick in places like Driscoll, these small towns, that they felt that somehow her speaking Spanish made her deficient. Now, let's even go down into this. Let's drill down a little. It's not that she spoke Spanish. She actually was fluent in English. It's just that the people did not want to have Spanish spoken. Now, outside of a language, Spanish is culture. Spanish is historical imperative. Spanish reminds people that, hey, Americans, you weren't here first. But what's come out of this situation is something that we have to discuss because it has a narrative now. And now the scope has gone from teaching white to making white right. Making a whitewashed interpretation of society, laws, history is now in full effect. We're going to talk about it. We'll be right back. I'm Preacher Moss on the ShOUT Show. Thanks for joining us. Let's roll. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for coming back. Listen, we're going to shout out. If you're coming to the show for the first time, I'm going to keep this thing very brief. Share, subscribe, like. You know what that means. I appreciate you. If you want to get on the show and you want to say something, get in the comment section. Share your thoughts. Don't be shy. Don't be a wallflower. People around here share their thoughts all the time. Don't be weak. Don't be soft. You got something to say, get it off your chest. This is the ShOUT Show. And if you do it, if we agree with it, we agree with it. If we have questions, we're going to ask questions. Like I said, I'm the host of the show, but I am not the owner of the platform. The owner of the platform is you, the people that watch the show, who give their input and we have discussions. All right. And I say the basis of what makes the show, the core of the show, is the people who are on the show. When I say the people who are on the show, I'm talking about the ShOUT Show family, the ShOUT Show soldiers. I see people that are watching the show. They haven't gotten to the comment section. It's all right. But you know what? I'm going to consider you ShOUT Show family. Just jump in the comment section, holler at us. Get your shout out. Don't be shy. All right. So I'm going to show you how it works when I start in the building. First up, we got my brother, Johnny L. Thomas, better known as JT. He's always going to be JT. Hey, JT, I'm coming to Chicago next week, so let's talk. We need to get some deep dish pizza. We'll talk about it a little bit later. I hope you're doing well, little brother. I think you might enjoy this topic, inshallah. These are things that we've talked about on some of the long road trips when Preacher Moss was a young, hungry comedian trying to get on the come up. These are things that we talked about. And I'm hoping this episode of Teaching White will absolutely resonate with some of you, inshallah. Okay, next up, we got Altaf Rashid, our Canadian ambassador to the show, making sure the quality of the show is up to par on this side of the border and the other side of the border. Altaf, I think you can definitely identify with this because we talked about some stuff about citizens of First Nation citizens and things like that. It is something that's comparable to this, but it's weird because it happens like in the 1950s. Like the legal case that happens with what I'm about to talk about actually happens right after Brown versus Board of Education. So stick with us on that. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming out on the show. Appreciate you. What's going on, Sister Salim? Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I think you may know what I'm about to talk about. Feel free to jump in at any time. Like I said, this is everybody's platform. I'm just the host. Please give my salams to your family, your mom, dad. I owe your dad a call. Just go check on me. I've fallen off. I'm admitting it. So please, thank you so much for coming on the show. And I want to acknowledge that Sister Salim is an educator. She's been on the show before. She's part of our ShOUT Show family, ShOUT Show family, and ShOUT Show teacher, if you will. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Sister Ree, what's going on, Sister Ree? Everybody, let's make dua for Sister Ree. She has her food plate. I'm sorry, Ree. I forgot the name of the place. I have so much stuff I'm doing today, which is no excuse. It basically comes down to the fact that I'm getting forgetful. So she's having her debut of her food, her delicious food, Soulful Creations. It's going to be at the International Marketplace That will be 239 Greens Road, Houston, Texas. Get there or go hungry because that's going to be some good food. Shout out, Sister Ree. Next up, we got Sister Satana working the ones and twos of the production cycle. Sister Satana has been busy trying to help your brother pull some stuff together. Shout out to you, Sister Satana. I know I don't give shout outs to you, but shout out to you. And thank you so much for making this happen. Let's get to our topic today. Teaching white, unpatriotic history. I'm going to start where I ended. Imagine you have a child, brothers and sisters. Imagine you have a child that's in the first grade. And at the end of the first grade year, they say that child doesn't pass. And you're worried at the first year. And at the end of the second, you have to repeat, the child doesn't pass. Your child is kept in the first grade for 3 years running. I don't know about you, but I would be on CNN, most of your major news outlets, and I would have caught a charge with somebody, teacher, principal, somebody. You ain't gonna hold my baby back for 3 years straight. It happened, brothers and sisters, to this young girl named Lupe Alamon. Now, the case, if you want to look at it, it's a big case, actually. The case is picked up by her son, Eduardo Alemán. Now, he is a PhD out of Columbia University. Ironic that this young man would make this, and it's not ironic. He would make the case, brothers and sisters, that public education is under siege. Public education is something that's paid for by the taxpayers. However, you have politicians who have injected certain components to make sure that public education is skewed. I'm going to let everybody know how it happened and why you need to start listening a lot more. In 1950, this young girl, young Latina, young Mexican, and I want to also emphasize the fact that one of the things we have not heard about that has really been suppressed is actually Mexican American studies. We talk about African American studies. Nobody's talking about Mexican American studies because it's pretty much been stomped out. You know, the guts have been pulled out of it and nobody's advocating for it. And people don't know. But in this case, this young lady was held in the first grade for 3 years. The reason she was held in the third grade for 3 years because they said that she didn't speak English. However, this young lady and seven other students in her class, they spoke fluent English. It's a clear case of racism. It's just that they didn't want to teach the Mexican kids. The premise was given that this is before ESL, English as a second language, was taught in public school. The idea is that if the teacher had to work with these kids to teach them English, somehow it would take away attention from the kids that did not speak Spanish. I call BS on that one. You can call BS on it too. The problem, brothers and sisters, is this is happening all the time. These kids were not in special ed to the point that these kids, their parents had to go to federal court to get this thing flipped around. It's easy to think, oh, they went to federal court to get it flipped around. That's not the point. The point is they had to go to federal court to get it flipped around because it had been going on. It was embedded. It was law, brothers and sisters. And what we see, brothers and sisters, now is that the powers that be, just like when we deal with COVID, you have politicians making policy about medicine and science. They're not science. They don't do medicine. However, they got to a place embedded that they feel as though they could do so. Or even on the other side, people who are against the vaccine somehow argue anything other than science. Bogus documents on one side, bogus documents on the other one. Illegitimate arguments on this one, illegitimate arguments on this one. In the middle are the people who matter the most. So why do I bring this up? I bring this up, brothers and sisters, because there's a movement now. In the state of Texas, they had something that was, it was a bill, and it became law. HB 3979. Again, that's HB 3979. Now, why is that important? I'm going to tell you guys something. Please remember this. It's important that this happens in Texas because a lot of people don't know that things in terms of educational law, educational initiatives, textbooks, everybody waits for the state of Texas to go first, and they follow behind Texas. Houghton Mifflin, all these folks, they follow behind Texas. So this idea of a HB 3979 is a template that's now law. Governor Greg Abbott made it law. Now, what is the aspect of HB 3979? Here's the ruling. It says that social study teachers, and I don't want to say just social studies teachers, I'm talking about conscious people. They said social studies. This is slick. The social studies teachers cannot teach that one group holds itself inferior over another group. It also teaches that a social study teacher cannot advocate in a space where you say that one group is racist towards another group. Well, damn it, that's unpatriotic. America is built on truth, justice, and the American way. If there's no truth, there's no justice. And believe me, calling American, no way. You know, when you start to think about this, and I played this over a couple times in my mind, the aspect, brothers and sisters, is that people, much the same as the folks that did the insurrection, they are in a space right now where they're rewriting history. As much as you can have an insurrection whereby nobody ever breached the Capitol with a Confederate flag until now, 2021, we still have problems with a commission finding guilt, finding results. Who we have politicians who refuse to give gold stars to men who risked their lives to protect folks in the Capitol. In fact, they protected some of these folks, brothers and sisters. My point here, and anybody can chime in. Let's put some comments up. My point, brothers and sisters, is that you can have what she said, a repurposing, a refine, don't ask, don't tell. Here it is, don't know. Sister Salim, don't know. And you can have don't ask, don't tell. But when you get to don't know, you have something. Because a lot of people, I'm just bringing up this case with the Latino population. And the Latino population faces very unique challenges here in the United States. So you have the Dreamers Act, you have racism about who's coming across the border. But here's the thing that nobody's talking about. Nobody's talking about the fiduciary responsibility to educate these kids when they come across the border. The processing of these kids when they come, legal or not, brothers and sisters, is so long, they're not in educational surroundings. They're not being taught. Where they were held, there was no school teachers. There were no tutors. There were none. You had Border Patrol reading books to little kids. Now, if this sounds harsh, that's because it is. When you think of this, brothers and sisters, we say it's 1950, but this HB 3979 passed. And you know what they put the kibosh on? You know who they close? You won't hear in 10 years, you won't hear about Malcolm X, definitely. But you really won't hear about Martin Luther King, even though you have a holiday. No Fannie Lou Hamers, which I've talked about. No Medgar Evers. Nobody of religious significance. So no Elijah Muhammad, Honorable Elijah Muhammad. You might hear about Muhammad Ali, but only in the space that he was a great American and boxer. But we won't hear about his religion. So there's a danger that happens here, brothers and sisters, whereby the question is, are we complicit? You know, and I frame complicit because now that it's law, how diligent are we going to be to get the law changed? Much the same as a tax cut, brothers and sisters, these laws are just as damaging. You know, we'll have the Trump tax cut for the next 10 years. We can't pay for it. But here's the deal. When they make the tax cut, they don't care about what happens 10 years down the road. They won't be around, or they won't care if they are around. What, you going to put them in jail? It was a legal decision. It's a law. The same thing has been happening to education. Thus, you have the assault on critical race theory. The only thing, brothers and sisters, that looks at American historical legal decisions and actions and breaks it down upon intent. Is it done on a bedrock of equality? Is it done on a bedrock of inequality? Just the idea, just the idea that we would silence history and anyone who goes to investigate it is somehow unpatriotic. Literally, teaching white is unpatriotic. You do a disservice, of course, to people of color, but you do a disservice, a bigger disservice to people who are white. People who need to know essentially, like Maya Angelou says, why the cage bird sings. You need to know that this is what's going on, particularly as the demographics change. And the spaces in the United States become a little bit browner, more browner, and this becomes less white over here. And in this space where you have people now who are going through the aspect of history, destroying education. Let me tell you something. This is nothing new. This is absolutely nothing new. You know, I've been in a pressure cooker of teaching. I taught severely most disturbed kids. And in the state of Wisconsin, they were really, really heavy on standardized tests. They started these kids on standardized tests, you know, second, third grade, standardized tests. I mean, the kids are just learning how to learn, and you were dumping them on standardized tests. We got to test them. And then, you know, fate comes out. There's a report back in Wisconsin back in the day, and they said, you know why they're testing them? They said, who's paying for the test? You know who's paying for the test? Defense contractors. And the defense contractors were paying for the test because they realized gleaning the information, the educational information, gleaning it, they were able to successfully predict to a relatively accurate point how many prisons they were going to need to build. Question, who do you think is going to fill those prisons? I'm not even going to say wait for it. You know exactly who I'm talking about. And this right now becomes a situation now. Because if you are teaching a group of kids anything other than about themselves, you can teach them about history, but you have to teach them about themselves, which makes this whole thing down in Driscoll, Texas, criminal. This is criminal neglect. And so when you start going through that process, you know, there's a term in teaching. It's called scaffolding, right? It's called scaffolding. You start at a certain level with a kid, and then you move this way. It's heavy this way, then it's in the middle, and then you know the kid has more autonomy. The student has more autonomy. This is reverse scaffolding, except it doesn't get light on either side. You move them over here where they don't know about themselves. You teach them less and less about themselves, and then on the other side, you inculcate them and say that this is actually the process that you need to be following. That this is the process that's for you. Everyone else has done this process. And when you eliminate history, you don't have voices of dissent. You don't have voices that say, hey, man, that's not the way it works. You know, I was speaking to someone yesterday, and we were laughing about Black inventors. We talk about Thomas Edison and the light bulb, but they never talk about that brother who came up with the incandescent bulb, the thing that allows it to stay on for hours and hours and hours. Or the person came up with the stoplight, the traffic light. The person came up with the golf tee. I can go on and on and on and on and on. I could do 3 shows on George, my peanut guy, George Washington Carver. I can go on him for forever on 3 shows just on the inventions that he came with. And this is inventions that don't have high level of technology to get to them. I mean, you have to have some kind of advanced knowledge. And we're not teaching our kids that these people exist. So I say, you know, if there's a donkey of the day, it goes to, thank you, Lewis Latimer. If there's a donkey of the day, it goes to Texas, and it's going to go to all the other people who are going to follow after Texas. Because once you have a precedent, good or bad, people feel like I don't have to make the case anymore. So the question may be, how do we reverse that? Right? So Sister Slim has a lot of comments up here. I hope we're getting them up. Because she's a teacher, educational trends is a real field of study. Yes. The brother the young man whose mother this was, that was held back in first grade 3 times, Yeah, he's a PhD out of Columbia University, and he's talking about educational equity. That's his space. And even now, talking about educational equity in 2021, considering what his mother went through, and that there's a on record, there's a federal case where people had to fight to undo this injustice. There's a federal case. We still find ourselves in a I guess in an understanding reality that in terms of education for Latino rights, it's darn near non-existent. I don't think they really teach. They don't even teach Mexican American history in elementary school, and definitely in not high school. Think about that. Through the advocacy and of course blood, sweat, and tears, and just sheer outrageousness, Black people want to know about themselves, and they want to make sure you're watching when I learn about myself. You know how we are. That we have African American studies around the country, but even that becomes a challenge. The idea of African American studies taught by African Americans is the basis, brothers and sisters. Thank you, Brother Derek Bell. The basis for critical race theory. And summarily, if we keep looking back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and not questioning, there'll be nothing there. There'll be nothing there. So, there's another bill coming down the line for HB 3979 because our lawmakers, white supremacy is a situation. They say misery deserves more misery. If I give you misery, that means that you're entitled to more misery. It's the same thing. And it seems incredible to me, maybe incredible to you, is just the fact that you would deny history, but you want them to see history. It's like if it was a book, brothers and sisters, if it was a book that these people were writing, I think the title would be Rednecks, Racism, and Redundancy. Rednecks, Racism, and Redundancy. Because one of the most disrespectful things is when I'm watching you teach me something and I know you're lying. Or worse, I'm watching you teach me something and you're not equipped to teach it. But by privilege, you're allowed to stand in front of me and I have to look at you because that's the only person they will put in the classroom. You. And I'm not talking to any other particular, I'm not talking to a particular teacher, but I'm like, the system. This system is locked into this thing that this is all you get and this is what we're going to give you. Despite the fact you pay taxes, despite the fact we go to wars and we fight war, despite the fact we're always fighting for citizenship, despite your constitution, this is the reality that we have. This is what you're leaving me with. In 10 years, I'm going to open up a book about American history. It'll be nothing about the trials and tribulations of African Americans, our civil rights leaders, our pioneers, our visionaries. There'll be nothing about people who speak Spanish in the United States. And that way, when you see people that speak Spanish, they look more foreign to you. It doesn't matter whether they were born here, they're fluent in English. It doesn't matter, brothers and sisters. And all you Muslims out there, ain't a damn thing in American history about you either. Unless Black folk did. So listen, I'm not going to get into a whole lot of policy because that's a whole lot of shit. What you got to say, Mom? We call this teach them white. Whites making policy that assume they maintain power while Black people have majority in numbers. Well, yeah. One of the first things they ever told me in critical race theory is there's no such thing as the dominant majority. It's always a dominant minority. Even our political system. How many seats in Congress? How many senators? Think about that. That established policy for not today, not tomorrow, possibly the next 20, 30, 40 years. How many judges? A minority of judges. And why? Because they are efficient at interpreting law? No. They get nominated. They keep the jobs for life. And just the same as they keep the job for life, brothers and sisters, when you miseducate somebody, when you deny them even the opportunity to have a conversation, because this is going directly at teachers. This is not even curriculum. Hear me now. This is not even curriculum that they're talking about. This is the idea that a teacher speaks about this thing. That teacher's in violation of HB 3979. So my brothers and sisters, wake up or ship out, because these are the dangers of teaching white. I'm Preacher Mars. This is SOS, the Shout Out Show. Thank you so much. Let's get to our sponsors, please. I want to talk about our main sponsor, brothers and sisters, been with us from the get-go. That's BeFinanciallyIndependent.com. Again, that's BeFinanciallyIndependent.com. You can go to the website, or you could call 1-888-496-6845. Again, that's 1-888-496-6845. Let's talk about our other sponsor. That's right. If you're thinking about getting a quality Islamic graduate or doctorate level education, you want to check out BAN Islamic School. Check out BAN Islamic School. Listen, I'm telling you, I'm not bragging. I got my master's in Islamic education. I know a lot of y'all ain't think I was gonna make it. Hell, I didn't think I was gonna make it. All right, so but my point is, they have qualified staff, they have dedicated staff, they have great instructors, and the hierarchy. My main man, Jihad Turk, the president, and Munir Sheikh, who's the VP of students, they do a wonderful job of making sure people get through. You know, they embrace the whole idea of non-traditional learning. And I say, listen, if you want to go get that degree and expand your horizons, expand your career options, do it. They have one of the best programs, brothers and sisters, the Masters of Divinity for Muslim chaplaincy, the only one in the country. Check them out. All right, brothers and sisters, I am out. You guys have been fabulous. See you tomorrow on Throwback Thursday. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Stop teaching white. Yo, assalamu alaikum. I'm Preacher Moss, comedian extraordinaire, but I like to add a new title to my name. I'm Professor Preacher Moss. You know why? Because I just graduated. Wait a minute, let me get this out of here. This is it. Okay. I'm Professor Preacher Moss, and it's come through the courtesy and the blessing of the Muhammad Ali Scholarship, which came through Bayan Islamic Graduate School. Now, listen, I know a lot of you people are thinking, can I do it? Yes, you can do it. This is the part where I'm supposed to say, it's easy. It's not easy. Listen, it was easy to get this degree. Trump would be a mufti. I digress. Listen, though, for you brothers and sisters that are interested, go to bayanonline.org, and you could be like me. Put yourself in the picture for Islamic education. Wait a minute, there's a picture right there. Sound like them, everybody. Take care. Preach them off.